Go ahead, Fred. The floor is yours.
Before Fred,
Before I begin, have we got Rashid?
Yeah, where is Rashid?
Yeah, I haven't seen him come in.
Fred, it's Mary Beth. Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, yes. But
Fred, I just wanted to introduce you. I wanted to welcome you here. We're so glad you're able to join us today after the snafu with your internet yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to read, just say that again, how important you have been instrumental in bringing this conference topic of, that of Between Two Seas and with your collaborators, plenary presenters, and how much we appreciate that you selected IAJS to do this. And there's just such positive response, and everyone's looking forward to hearing more today and tomorrow. So I just wanted to acknowledge you and thank you. I did it yesterday, but you weren't present, so I wanted you to hear it today. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth. And this time I'm here in body and in spirit. Well, I guess the best thing to do is to start. And I thought I'd just like to read something out. I would have read out yesterday had I been here. And this is a very short statement from Malik Badri, who was the founder of modern Islamic psychology. And I'd be interested to see how this resonates with you. Badri says, Islamic psychology is a holistic understanding of the human being that is grounded in the knowledge of the soul from the Islamic tradition and focuses on the heart as center of the self rather than the mind. I can't see any difference between that and Jungian psychology. So my motivation for setting this up, I should add with the help of Samir, he was indispensable, was to promote that dialogue between two psychologists that are both centered on soul. Tonight we have, I hope, Rashid, who I suspect has worked with Malik Badri. I'll just say a little bit about him. Rashid Skinner is a consultant, clinical psychologist and Jungian analyst, formerly lectured at Cambridge Muslim College, and is now clinical director of ISAN, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, an Islamic psychology-based therapy service. He also has visiting professorships at Karachi and IIU Islamabad. And Rashid will be lecturing on Al-Ghazali and Jung. Now, as far as I know, this is a first, and it brings that combination of traditional and modern psychology into a grand synthesis. Mm-hmm. Stephen is, as you may know, a San Francisco-based analyst. I was interested to know that he doesn't just work with adults, he works with adolescents and with children too. And I worked in schools an awful lot, so I just know how exacting that is. And from my conversations with Stephen, I can see that he is deeply into the Sufi tradition. Rashid and Stephen link up because it was Al-Ghazali who brought Sufism into mainstream Islam. So there is a connection here. As I understand it, Stephen is going to be talking about the meaning of love from the perspective of Sufism. And this love is a transpersonal love. In fact, it's a cosmogonic love. The world was created by an act of love. The famous hadith, I was hidden treasure, I yearned to be known, and so I created the world. I think that's the perspective Stephen's coming from, and I think it's probably time I stopped stealing his thunder from him and handed you over to him. So we will have Stephen, then some discussion. Hopefully by then Rashid will be able to join us and tell us all about Al-Ghazali. Okay, Stephen, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred, for your kind words. So hello, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to be with all of you today. As you can see, the title of my paper is On the Meaning of Love from the Perspective of Sufism. Its clinical implications for psychotherapy and analytic work. I'll be sharing some of the ideas that originate from Sufi mystics on the meaning of love, and I will explore how they integrate with theoretical ideas in analytical psychology towards healing and transformation. But before that, I'd like to start with a few poems. That's how I usually start my talks. And I don't know how that this is not moving. Maybe, okay, here we go. In a poem, Rumi, who lived in the 12th to 13th century, says, I burned and melted like a grain of salt in the vast, endless ocean of your love and compassion. Belief and fidelity vanished, as did certainty and doubt. Deep, deep in the center of my heart, a bright star appeared, and the seven heavens disappeared in that one tiny star. Hafiz, who's another mystic poet from the 14th century, says, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. Sufism, which is rooted in Persian mysticism, is currently the main branch of mystical Islam with the largest number of followers worldwide, and is an integration of Zoroastrianism, Mazdaism, Hermetism, Neoplatonism, and Shi'ism, and is based on the works of Sufi philosophers like Sohrawardi, Ibn Arabi, Ghazali, Mullah Sadra, and Sufi poets like Attar, Rumi, Nizami, Hafiz, and Jami. At its mythological core, Sufism is quite archetypal, and it deeply resonates with Jung's archetypal psychology. In fact, the two traditions have a great deal in common, and there are many similarities and parallels between the ideas from Sufism and analytical psychology. What is interesting and very relevant to our conversation today is that all these Sufi philosophers and poets viewed Sufism as the religion of love, or what Persians call mazhab-i-ishq, in which the divine is viewed as the beloved, and the relationship between the divine and the follower is primarily based on mutual experience of love. So they're like two lovers. For example, Ibn Arabi, who was one of the greatest Sufi mystics and philosophers from the 12th century, said, I follow the way of love, and where love's caravan takes its path, there is my religion, there is my faith. Sufis believe that the entire creation came into existence because of love, and it was born out of the love of the divine. Furthermore, it was out of the divine's love and the desire to be known by its creatures that the divine created the entire universe. There's a famous hadith or saying, which is attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, in which the divine says, God says, I was a hidden treasure and I loved to be known. So I created the world and the creatures so that they could find me and that they could know me. Everything that I'll be talking today will refer back to this very profound hadith, which is packed with imagery and meaning, as you can see. And we will discover how it applies to the healing value of love in clinical work. This hadith is one of the most core ideas that is at the heart of Sufism, in which the entire universe is essentially viewed to be created out of divine love. As Tom Chittum has said in some of his work, from this perspective, the archetypal act of creation is not based on divine power, but rather it is rooted in divine love. And to create means to love, and creation is all love. This hadith points to the love of the divine for his creation and his longing to be known. It relates to the concept of kashf in Sufism, which basically means discovering or knowing the divine, and explains the deepest need in human psyche or soul, which is the universal need to be seen and to be understood. The fact that this deep desire to be seen and to be known is also exists in the divine points to its original roots in the divine itself, which helps us to reframe and understand better the psychological problem of narcissism in a whole new light. Furthermore, love becomes the vibration produced by the breath of the divine. It is the single dynamic and generating force in all existence, and by itself leads to the emergence of the experiences of desire and longing. Sufism proposes that through the effect of the irresistible magnetic attraction of love, desire is formed, which leads to motion and movement, and that becomes the generating force, or what we call energy, in the cosmos. And it's through the force, through this force of love that non-existence comes into existence. In a poem, Rumi says, love is not an emotion, it's your very existence. This hadith that I shared with you earlier brings a deeper numinous and archetypal relevance to the core ideas of divine origins of the psychological experiences of love, attraction, desire, longing, and imagination. And as you can tell, it has profound implications for depth psychotherapy. These ideas become especially relevant in terms of working with interpersonal and intrapersonal issues, especially related to love, attraction, longing, and desire. Consequently, all forms of narcissism and issues related to emptiness, isolation, depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, and all various kinds of addictions, all together represent some of the predominant, there are predominant psychological difficulties in our modern times, all could become a little bit more meaningful from this lens of love and longing for divine love, or sadness or sorrow for the absence of love or connection to a meaningful relationship with that which is numinous in our lives. In addition, these notions are helpful in developing a deeper understanding of the importance of love and its various forms and of manifestations in all types of relationships, including the transference and countertransference relationship in therapy. First, let's look at just love and the experience of love for a moment. I remember when I started my training to become a Jungian analyst almost 20 years ago, I went around and talked to the oldest analysts that I could find at the San Francisco Jung Institute. And I asked them, what did they think was the most important factor that contributed to healing in their work with their patients? I was astounded at what I found. Without exception, everyone in private confessed to me that out of everything that they had learned and they had trained in all their training and practices, this single factor that they thought was most healing and ultimately led to transformation with their patients was love. And by love in this context, I mean spiritual love or transpersonal love, not romantic love. The topic of love and its experience is, of course, archetypal and universal, is basically the topic of experience, contemplation, passionate expression by infinite number of poets, artists, philosophers, mystics, and probably everyone who has ever been alive in the world. The word love in itself in Persian language, the word for it is ishq, which derives from the word ashaqa in Arabic. And ashaqa means a grapevine or an ivy that grows up on a tree, intertwining until the two parts of it become one. So symbolically, the ultimate goal of love is a conjunctio, which is oneness or union with the beloved. The first Sufi text on the metaphysics of love was written by Ahmad Ghazali, a famous 11th century Persian Sufi philosopher who proposed that all reality was the eternal expression of unfolding love, and that all experiences of love derived from and eventually returned to the divine. From this perspective, love is not an emotion, and as we think about it in our culture or in psychology, love becomes rather existence, as Rumi said. In another poem that I think is very supportive for psychotherapy and inner work, Rumi says, "Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against love." So this brings us to one of the concepts in Sufism, which I don't have time to go into, and it's a huge concept, is fetra, which is one of the 5 core pillars in Sufism and somewhat similar to Jung's idea of the religious instinct. According to fetra, all human beings have an inborn and an instinctual capacity to know the divine and reach wholeness or perfection on the spiritual path towards the divine. Moreover, the way we can reach the divine and become one with the divine is to open our hearts to love. There seems to be a consensus among various Sufi philosophers that the divine has provided us with various human experiences at the level of the soul that lead us to the experience of love or connection to the divine. Sohrawardi, who was one of the greatest Persian Sufi mystics of the 12th century and developed the widely known school of illumination or Ishraqi in Sufism, described these different experiences in his visionary work called The Treatise on the Reality of Love, and basically divided them to 3 categories out of which we can experience love. The first one is fear, sorrow, longing, or desire, which all emerge out of the experience or loss of separation from the divine. The second is beauty, which is the experience of the essence of the divine. And the third one is knowledge, which is the experience of getting to know the divine. And the integration of these categories or dimensions of reality leads to the formation of what we call in Persian mehr, which means love. Now, I'll talk about each of these categories, which are various basically psycho-spiritual experiences that come out of the original divine treasure and the hadiths that I shared with you earlier. But please bear in mind that all of these experiences are quite overlap one another, and it's very difficult to speak about each one very separately. In one of his poems in the Masnavi, Rumi says, "You're not a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in a drop," which really speaks to how everything is interconnected. Okay, so let's explore the first category, which is fear, sorrow, and longing or desire. From the perspective of Sufism, the experiences of fear, sorrow, longing, or desire emerge out of the fear of the loss of separation from the divine, which in a sense is really non-existence. So non-existence brings up loss and sorrow, and the fear of non-existence or death brings up longing or desire for existence, which is connection or union with the divine. In order to understand this better, we need to return to the hadith that I shared with you earlier, which again, I'll read it again. I was a hidden treasure and I loved to be known. So I created the world and the creatures so that they could find me and that they could know me. This is how Henry Corbin relates to this hadith. Here's a picture of him, and he describes the divine in its original state in relationship to this hadith, which helps us understand it deeper. Henry Corbin says, and I quote, "At the beginning, before the creation of the cosmos, the divine was alone in his unconditioned essence and yearned to be known. Out of the sadness and his sorrow in this primordial solitude, the divine sighed, and a divine breath descended, which is known in Sufism as Nafsur Rahman, meaning the sigh of existentiating compassion, which is the expression of the divine's desire and love to be known. It is out of this love," Henry Corbin says, "that divine created the world and yearned to be revealed in the beings who manifest him to himself as he manifests himself to them." A famous example is Rumi's life and his experience for his lover, Shams Tabriz, and then the devastating loss of Shams, which left Rumi in a devastating sorrow and longing. That ultimately led to the emergence of his profound poetry, through which he discovered the face of the beloved in the divine. From the perspective of Sufism, the emotional experiences related to fear, anxiety, sadness, and sorrow, and loss, and longing, and desire are all considered essential and meaningful experiences in existence that can be portals to the experiences of love and ultimately connect us to the divine, which altogether have profound implications, again, for clinical work with people who especially struggle with these issues. From this perspective, the experiences of unbearable crises and devastating disasters in our life, or even facing utter loss, can be opportunities through which we can find love and connect to the infinite. So we go to the next category. If you remember, the second category was beauty. Beauty is one of the, again, psychospiritual experiences that, as I mentioned, emerged out of the hidden treasure or the divine, leading to love. And I will again show you the hadith. And as again we look at it, we realize that one of the implications of the hadith is that the hidden treasure is both beautiful and luminous, and it attracts love because it is so beautiful. And the divine cannot help loving its own entire creation because it's beautiful, and becomes then a reflection of the image of his beauty back to himself, as he manifests himself to himself through his creative imagination. Sohrawardi's visionary treatise on, which is called On the Reality of Love, is also one of the most elaborate doctrines of beauty. It's beautifully written in Persian, where Sohrawardi describes the mystery of beauty at both the divine and human levels. He describes that the first thing that the divine created was this exceptionally beautiful luminous pearl, which we call aql in Persian, and means embodied wisdom, which leads to knowing the divine through the intrinsic qualities of being able to perceive beauty and experience love. So the third, the last category was knowledge, as you remember. Again, going back to the famous hadith, which the last sentence says, I created the world and the creatures so that they could find me and that they could know me. From the perspective of Sufism, knowledge of oneself and of the divine and the entire creation is actually thought to be carried in the soul. And the process of gaining any knowledge is ultimately an encounter with the divine. Actually, self-knowledge and the development of consciousness is highly valued and praised in Islam. In fact, the Quran encourages self-knowledge and emphasizes that 1 hour of reflection spent towards understanding oneself and the universe is worth more than 70 years of prayer, which is, I think, one of the best advertisements for the support of psychotherapy and inner work or analysis. As we know ourselves better, we discover the divine in ourselves and attain more knowledge of self and reflect it back to the divine, which goes back to what Jung wrote about Answer to Job. So knowledge and imagination and the whole experience of knowledge is another thing that Avicenna, who was, as you probably know, a worldwide physician, astronomer, and influential Islamic philosopher from the 11th century, he also really talked about knowledge a lot. And he developed a Neoplatonic form of cosmology through which he identified 3 main sources that we could acquire knowledge through. The first, he said, was attaining knowledge through sense perceptions. Second is attaining knowledge through logical thinking. Here it is, logical thinking. And the third one is attaining knowledge through imagination, which is through dreams, visions, intuition, and active imagination, which happens a lot in depth psychotherapy and Jungian analysis. So out of the 3 sources of knowledge that Avicenna has identified as connects us to love, it's imagination or creative imagination, which Sufis call Olam Malakut or Mundus Imaginalis, which is considered the greatest and the deepest source of knowledge in Sufism and also in analytical psychology. And in fact, mystics, philosophers like Ibn Arabi and Sohrawardi integrated Sufi philosophy with Platonic views and developed what they called the science of soul and identified imagination to be the central source for true knowledge and understanding reality. This is very, again, equivalent to what happens in depth psychotherapy and analysis. I give you a clinical example quickly. In my clinical work with patients who struggle, especially with chronic pain, I found that practices such as meditation and any type of creative work that involves imagination significantly help with pain reduction. In fact, most patients report less pain or sometimes no pain while they are involved in creative work. So we can't talk about love without mentioning the heart. Collectively, many cultures around the world think of the heart as the organ that experiences and expresses love. Transformation in Sufism involves the stages of connection between the self and the divine through the alchemy of the subtle heart, which is not the physical heart, but a spiritual heart, which is the psychospiritual organ in the subtle body. This spiritual heart is the organ that perceives the divine through turning inward and awaiting the gift of love as the divine reveals itself through prayer, meditation, and experiences of love. Ibn Arabi considered the subtle heart to be the organ of gnosis and the perception of the divine, and a site that carried infinite capacity for transformation and change in consciousness. The concept of the subtle body also exists in Jungian psychology, which originated from alchemy and was further developed by Jung. Subtle body basically is the somatic unconscious and is perceived imaginally through the eye of imagination, which is invisible to our sense perceptions. This is the medium or realm which exists beyond time and space and through which projections are transmitted from one person to the other. In a very simple poem, Rumi describes this way. He says, "I see my beauty in you." The mystic can see the various epiphanies of the divine through the eyes of the subtle heart, as the divine reveals himself to himself and is manifested in infinite forms at the spirit level. In the same way, the psychotherapist or analyst can see with his or her inner eye of imagination through the subtle body energies of the analytic field, the constellation of the self or the symbols that emerge in the transference and countertransference dynamics in clinical work. This subtle body area or imaginal realm in transference and countertransference is related to the, again, field that we call mundus imaginalis in Sufism, which is a direct place for connection to divine love. So this brings me to the conclusion of my paper and a theoretical proposal that I would like to share with you. Joe Cambry proposed in 2009 that there is an underlying synchronistic core to the experiences of deep empathy and mirroring that can emerge in the energetic analytic field between an analyst and a patient. Now, Jung also indicated that the psychoid archetype was especially linked to the occurrences of synchronistic events, and the principle of synchronicity, Jung said, actually generated acts of creation in time. Now, in Sufism, acts of creation in time are synonymous with love. So I would like to propose this following theoretical idea. As you can see on the diagram on your screen, during those moments in depth psychotherapy or Jungian analysis, when the therapist or analyst is compassionately mirroring the self, both the small self and the big self, to the patient, the therapist or analyst's self can exist simultaneously at several dimensions by holding multiple connections at once, such as connections to the patient's conscious and unconscious mind, and other states of consciousness, like the psychoid level, the superconscious, and mundus imaginalis in himself or herself, and in the patient, all simultaneously at once. As a result, a deeper resonance can emerge in these moments between the therapist and analyst, or analyst and the patient, in a relational field of psychic energy that also resonates with the numinous energies of the higher dimensions of the mundus imaginalis, which can spontaneously together activate the principle of synchronicity, as both Jung and Cambry were talking about, or a connection to the energies of divine love for healing and transformation, as Sufis talk about. So, in conclusion, the most important way through which we can hold and honor the healing value of love in our clinical work is to become more conscious of the experiences of the various aspects of divine love that I shared with you today, as they symbolically manifest in infinite ways in our hearts, in our souls, and in our lives. Then we should bring that symbolic attitude and consciousness to our clinical work to discover the various ways through which each patient's psyche symbolically expresses a connection to divine love in its own unique and meaningful way through the reality of their individuation path towards healing and transformation. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm open to questions or discussions.
Rule is already there. Maybe
Before we start, maybe take the
yeah, the
PowerPoint.
slides, the
Okay.
slides away so we can all see each other.
So, okay. So should I stop sharing? Is that what
Exactly.
you-
Stop sharing.
Okay.
There we are.
There we go.
Rula.
Hi, Stephen. First of all, thank you so much for this brilliant presentation with all those amazing connections between Sufism and Jungian psychology. And forgive me if I missed it, but I was just wondering because you did not mention Rabia at all, Rabia al-Adawiya, who is I think she's one of the founders of the whole idea of ashq or divine love. So I was just wondering where her place would be here.
Of course, her place would be here. I just, with the time we have,
Yeah.
it just doesn't give enough time. But thank you very much for bringing her in and including her. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was amazing. And thank you so much and I'm also connecting it with Birgit's talk yesterday, how the heart is also the center of knowledge and perception and everything. And yeah, it's lovely to know more about it. So we'll definitely be in touch if you can keep your email in the box, and we'd like to be in touch
Sure.
afterwards.
Sure. And thank you
Yeah,
so much
thank you.
for bringing Rabe in. Again, my apologies to her and to everyone for not being able to include everyone, because each person has their own each
Right.
one of these amazing philosophers and mystics have had
Mhm.
their own way of their own lens, and so yeah, that would be a longer paper, and I look forward to doing it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen.
Pleasure.
Catherine.
Thank you so much. It was very inspiring. I love the beautiful imagery. I think the patterns are the most beautiful thing. I wanted to say it was very interesting because the Renaissance Neoplatonists that I study from Italy, their process would have been imagination on the level of creation, where the images are completely visible, tangible, and then reason in the heart, right, the mind, and intellect. So they rose up this way. So again, we see that the transmission of love goes both ways freely, and it's nice to be able to use the different descriptions of the ascent and descent from the different traditions, because there isn't any conflict there. It's just a matter of the practice and the usage of it for the benefit of your clients. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gottfried, for bringing that. Yes, that whole, it can go both ways. And I think this is a spiritual tradition. Sufism is very meaningful to me because it includes the body so much. And the body is really the depth where we can experience it. It's not only it's not really an intellectual way, but it's also an experiential way.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roger.
Thank you very much. Great talk. Thanks so much. I thought at the very end, where you have your hypothesis about synchronicity and you have the two vertical lines in the people. If I may, I'd just like to say, I think it would be more productive to have one vertical line which lies between you. And then the question is simply how we become aware of those multiple levels of intertwining in which we are engaged and through which we are constituted at every moment anyway. Then we only need the concept of synchronicity if we start with the assumption of two isolated sort of psyches, like monads floating in space. That's not how we are. And there's a lot of, most fundamentally, people like Heidegger, I suppose, and our understanding of language suggests that the between is prior to separation. So I think, if I may say, I think you'd get further in your hypothesis, and then it doesn't need to be a hypothesis either. It can just be a descriptive elaboration of how we tune into that vertical line that actually lies between us, if I may say so.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. No, thank you, Rashid. Yes, actually, I see my husband, Ryan Bush, right there online, and I think his artwork is going to help me to transform. I think we need a 3D actually diagram, to be honest with you, and this is my whole purpose with it is to really show how there's so many multiple levels of reality that become one, and that in between place is really, really important. So, but yeah, I'm going to need our artistic help with that. But thank you.
Well, there's some wonderful literature on it as well, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. So before we carry on, Dr. Skinner has joined us. So we're going to go with everybody who has their hand raised and then go on to the following presentation. So please, Ryan.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Stephen, for that beautiful presentation. I was struck in one of the earlier miniatures that he showed early on in the presentation where the Prophet Muhammad is visiting heaven, and there are all these pairs of figures, and one of them is getting a branch from the tree and giving that to his paired figure. And that, since each of the pairs seem very clearly in love, but they also look very similar to each other, my personal assumption was that this was an image of our ordinary self and our soul or higher self. I think twin self in Sufism is the concept. I might be misremembering. But I was wondering if you could talk a little about the role of love for self in this. You talked about love in the analytic relationship and love for the divine, but people may not often quote RuPaul in these conferences, but as he says, if you can't love yourself, how the heck can you love anybody else? I was wondering if you could say a little bit about that love relationship as it relates to everything else.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, that image actually, I'm sorry, was misleading. It wasn't really, I think you're talking about the image of a person up on the tree to come bring a branch down. It's just a Persian miniature. And my whole idea was just trying to show how there are different levels of connection. It's not actually the Prophet Muhammad, but going to your,
he was on the upper right side, surrounded by the same glow and on the Burak. So that's what I was.
Oh, I see. Yes. Okay, but let's go to your question, which is very important, which is the love for ourselves or experiencing that. And basically, from what I understand in Sufism, there is no separation between us and the divine. Everything is divine love. Everything is one. And so there is no you and me. And so when we are experiencing love, we are experiencing the divine in us, and we are part of the divine, and there is no separation. And actually, we don't exist. There is this whole idea that everything is divine, and we are just, this is all part of a nice, beautiful dream.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Gottfried?
Thank you so much for your talk. It was absolutely revelatory. I'd like to say I'm, for more than 12, 15 years, I'm starting every morning with one or two poems by Hafiz or Rumis or Rabia, as Rula so importantly mentioned. So thank you ever so much. Just wanted to ask you, who said an hour spent to know oneself is more than worth 70 hours of prayer?
That's my understanding, Dr. Gottfried.
Oh.
That is my understanding is that that's a verse in the Quran. I don't know exactly where it is. I am not a religious scholar, but that's actually something that actually I was raised in Iran, and actually that's something that is referred to a lot in the Quran. That how this is why education and inner reflection is so valued in Islam, which a lot of people don't know about.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Just one tiny little thing. Already in 1906, Freud wrote to Jung, essentially one might say, the cure is affected by love.
Oh.
So that chimes with the old Jungians that you interviewed when you were training. Blessings to you, and thank you ever so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would love to get that reference. Thank you for sharing.
It's in the letters, page 12. Freud Jung letters, page 12.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Blessings.
Thank you.
Amy?
Hi, I also thank you. That was so beautiful. I love Sufism. I'm a poet and an intuitive and a Jungian, so I dwell in these realms most of the time. And I want to challenge just one thing you said and ask you about it. When you talked about love being the thing that most psychotherapists say is the most healing, you qualified that by saying it's love, but it's not romance.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Hafiz or Rumi would differentiate between love and romance. I think this is the most romantic thing that can be. So can you speak to how?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I didn't have enough time to elaborate because, I was at that moment, it was in the context of depth psychotherapy and analysis that I was talking about. Because as you probably know, I mean, of course, in any relationship, I really totally agree with you, Amy. Love, ishq, is the foundation for experience of the divine, and all kinds of experiences of love and romantic love and sexual love and all kinds of even sexual acts between people are experiences of divine love. But I was talking about, and this is difficult in the time we had, about romantic love in psychotherapy and analysis. Erotic experiences are part of any they come up in terms of in-depth work and in analysis. And unfortunately, then some therapists unfortunately fall for that projection and act on it. And that's why I was just trying to differentiate that, because they have to hold that. A therapist's job is to hold that projection and not fall for it, not act on it, but to symbolically understand it within the context of analytic work and help actually the patient to connect to that deep love in themselves and find that in themselves. So that's what I was trying to talk about. And I appreciate what you said, because the way probably came across, I didn't mean it for it to cancel any kind of romantic love in any other experiences. It's just, yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that it's this topic that becomes such the great challenge of the acceptance of the love, but also the denial because of those taboos, which are there obviously for reasons.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Evangeline, and then I think we do have to close to move on with Dr. Skinner. Please, Fred.
Thank you, Stephen. I think the only thing I could say about that lecture is I loved it. Just a quick one. You touched on the concept of mirroring towards the end, and I realize you you couldn't elaborate on that because of the time limit. So I'm just going to throw something out, and maybe this will be a topic for discussion later. I've got a quotation here from Winnicott, and it is, "In individual emotional development, the precursor of the mirror is the mother's face."
Mm.
So I think because time is running out, I'll just let that one resonate.
Oh, thank you for bringing that in. That's beautiful. That's right there, the image of the divine.
Yeah, he was a remarkable man. But I think it's too big to talk about, but I just want to bring it in.
Yeah, and
so,
I would add, and then for the mother is the image of the baby's face.
Yes, it's reciprocal.
Yeah.
And I think when that reciprocal relationship breaks down, well, I've had to deal with kids who are the casualty of that, and I'm sure you have too. It's absolutely crucial. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that in, Fred.
Evangeline?
We can't hear you.
Thank you very much for exposing us to beauty today. And I just have a quick word. Yesterday, Brigitte used the wonderful phrase for the relationship between analyst and patient, or whoever you are. He used the term riff, to riff together. It's a jazz riffing. And I just wanted to follow up Roger's comment with saying, yes, I think it's about riffing. This amazing thing that happens spontaneously and profoundly when we're communing at depth. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And as you know,
Duke Ellington used to close every show with "Love You Madly." Sorry, Stephen, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. I was just going to very quickly just say, and I'm sorry I missed that presentation, but I'm assuming what it is, it's really about the mutual transformation that happens, that any actually depth psychotherapy or analytic work that is healing is as Jung, said, the healing really is kind of, it's really mutual.
Yeah, following up on Roger's comment, really as the multidimensionality of the process. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Nouriani. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, welcome, Dr. Rashid Skinner. You were introduced in absentia, but in order to have more time to listen to your presentation, how about we carry on? Do you need to share slides?
Gustavo?
Yes.
I think we're going to stop recording and then restart recording.
That's
okay.
totally correct. Thank you so much.